A few weeks ago, I put out a video um, that really has like even more meaning to me right now as I'm working through the loss of my mom. Um, yeah, obviously, um, death is a terrible thing, and we're visited by death. Hopefully not too many times, but in my case, I lost my son, um, and then I lost my granddaughter and lost my grandparents, and I lost my dad a few months ago, and now I lost my mom, and it's tough to lose people that you love. So unnatural um, that they're here and then they're gone. Um, but I made this video a few weeks ago about what God is doing with us and what we ultimately become. And it's that hope that keeps me hopeful. It's just the idea that ultimately we are becoming what God intends for us to become, which is that we will bear His image. A lot of times when we hear things like that, and that God said, "Let us make man after our likeness." We believe that was accomplished in the garden, but it wasn't. It was a process that was set forth that ultimately concludes with God, the fullness of God dwelling in us, that we become like Jesus is. Obviously, Christ would need to be revealed so that we can have an understanding of what we are becoming. And in Christ being revealed, God is being revealed, as we know God through Christ. So my hope is that all these people that I lost, and the people that you've lost, that ultimately these people are not lost forever, that these people will be raised again, and when they do, they will have all the things that kept them from reaching their full potential in God, perfection, that they that they bear the image of God fully. All those things that held them back: sin, death, the flesh, carnality, um, all the struggles, disease, mental illness, all the things that affect us in this world, that these things are shed, they're burnt away, and what remains is only that which is of God in us. So in that video I made a few weeks ago, I made a connection between Ephesians 4:6, where it says that God is in all, and then 1 Corinthians 15:28, when God becomes all in all. And I pointed out that in order for us to know what that means, that God will be all in all, we need to look to Christ, because in Jesus the fullness of God dwelt. And so when the scriptures say that God will ultimately be all, that's the fullness, that's every part of. And so as we live our lives today, God is in all of us, but we know that God is not all in us, that there's a lot of us in us that we are working through as we're being perfected and matured and raised by God to ultimately learn righteousness and become like He is. So I know that, and I don't know this because my mother lived a good life, although she was a good woman. I don't know this because my mother was a believer in Christ, although she was a believer in Christ. I know this because God has promised it to us. God has assured us that He will be all in all. And so I'm confident in the resurrection. I know that while my mother, we laid her to rest last week, and that like Lazarus, like Jesus said about Lazarus, my mother sleeps. But I know that's not the end of her story, and that she will be raised again. And when she does, she will be made in the twinkling of an eye. Whatever's left of that sin nature and that death nature that we all embody, that all of that will be burnt away, and what will be left is only God and My mother will have the splendor of the glory of God. And when I see her again, she'll be more beautiful than I knew her to be, because the fullness of God will dwell in her. You know, that's a remarkable thing that we have to look forward to with, you know, with regards to the people that we love, is that this is not, that death is the end. You know, that is what we're being saved from. That you know, Adam was told, "Ye shall surely die, as in Adam all die." That is the plight of humanity, that we die, that we may have, you know, whatever number of years are allotted for us, you know, 60, 70, 80, 90, maybe 100 years, but then we die. And were it not because Christ died also, but had victory over death, that our death would be final. But because he had victory over death and the grave, that we too will have that victory. And while the scriptures say, as in Adam all die, it also says, even so, or in like manner, equally, in Christ shall all be made alive. And that's ultimately how God becomes all in all. And so again, if you lost people that you love, it's not the end. Like a seed must fall to the ground to become that majestic oak tree, or whatever it is destined to become, we too must fall to the ground to become what ultimately God has in store for us, which is that we will be raised and ultimately conformed to the image of his Son. We shall be, John says, as he is. And how is he? The fullness of God dwelt in him. And so God will be all, or every part of, in all, everyone. And that's the hope that we can take away. And we don't have to despair, but we can comfort one another in this hope, knowing that God will accomplish his objectives, and will be all in all. Fullness of God will dwell in my mom and my son and my granddaughter, my grandparents, and, you know, my dad, and will as well in all those that you've lost. There is hope even in the midst of despair.